Now, Representative Bachmann, to start our discussion, our panelists have asked each candidate to prepare 3 minutes of opening remarks to define their understanding of the foundational first principles of our republic, as well as to discuss what they believe is the constitutional scope and role of the federal government and the actions that they would take as president to reflect that role. Congresswoman Bachmann, the floor is yours for 3 minutes for your opening statement.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to be able to come to the Palmetto Freedom Forum to explain to all of you why I call myself a constitutional conservative. First, consider a quotation that shows the wisdom of a former Republican governor from Massachusetts, Calvin Coolidge, that says this: "To live under the American Constitution is the greatest political privilege that was ever accorded to the human race." Now consider another quotation that was given by the man who occupied the presidency of the United States longer than any other, Democrat Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who said, "The United States Constitution has proved itself the most marvelously elastic compilation of the rules of government ever written." This is a wildly divergent view of the Constitution. One recognizes the privilege of living in a government that shows constraint of political power. The other demonstrates the Constitution as a means to an end, which sees elasticity and twisting and bending to achieve political objectives. This, I believe, will be our choice in 2012. Which view of the Constitution will we prefer? And the beauty of the Constitution is contained in the first principles, and it's plain on its face. It says that we are a United States. We have a federal government with enumerated powers. We have 3 branches of government. They're distinct, but they're wholly compatible. We also have a Bill of Rights that embodies the core principle of the Declaration of Independence, which is that God has given to every individual inalienable rights, and they cannot be denied by any human power. As President of the United States, my first question to any political appointee would be, what do you see as your role under the Constitution? And when I am working with the Congress of the United States, my guiding principle will be that the government works best when it acts within the limitations of the Constitution, but that it fails when it denies that principle and instead makes decisions made on political expediency. You see, I will understand something from day one as president that the current president of the United States has failed to demonstrate an understanding, and it's this. It's that when the people of the United States place this awesome responsibility and privilege to be the president, what they have given is the ability to act under the Constitution and to place oneself over the Constitution, that sacred document.
Michele.
Thank you.
Michele, I'll start the questioning. Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you doing it. And let's continue on what you're talking about, because it's one of the most important subjects to me, is that our next president really understand what limited government means. If you are president, what are the things in Washington that you would downsize, eliminate, or redirect to the state? So are we doing things at the federal level that we just shouldn't do at all? And what would you recommend that we not do anymore? What programs?
Well, all across the United States, wherever I have gone, this is something that I have seen audiences tell me over and over, as well as when I've gone into businesses and to speak with people directly. They see that the current United States government and its framework is acting outside of the bounds of the Constitution. Probably the most obvious, I would say, Jim, would be this: Obamacare and the individual mandate that is unconstitutional and currently is contained in Obamacare. I think another action that people see as unconstitutional are the appointment of czars to speak to the United States president, because that's bypassing Congress and going directly to the president. Here's something else. The President of the United States took an oath to faithfully execute the laws of the United States, but the President has also stated that he sees that the law of the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional. He has said that he will not uphold that law. He has also said he will not uphold current deportation laws that apply to illegal aliens. These are areas where we see unconstitutionality. Within the spending that we're seeing with the federal government is spending far in excess of what it takes in. Areas of government would include, for instance, I believe, the Department of Education, because the Constitution does not specifically enumerate, nor does it give to the federal government the role and duty to superintend over education that historically has been held by the parents and by local communities and by state government. To put that into the federal government, as we saw a Department of Education in the late 1970s, has eviscerated the constitutional understanding that the control of education truly lies with the parents. That's just one example.
Good. Thank you. Let's jump subjects. This week, President Obama is going to give another jobs speech. As CBO has said, we can't score a speech. But jobs are clearly a big issue for our country. The economy seems to be stalled. People are hurting. What would you do? What is your jobs program?
Well, as President of the United States, and also as a former federal tax litigation attorney, and also as a business owner myself, my husband and I have created, and we've created jobs, and we run a successful business. We believe in profit. We actually think that profit is a good thing, and that we should encourage that in this country. And as President of the United States, one of the first things that I would do today is I would offer to the United States Congress that earnings that are accrued by United States companies earned overseas be brought into the United States with a 0% rate on repatriation. Part of the problem has been $1.2 trillion worth of earnings are staying overseas. This is real capital that belongs to American companies that wouldn't have to be borrowed at taxpayer expense, nor would it have to be paid back, nor would we pay interest on the earnings. It would come into the United States as a $1.2 trillion capital infusion, and that would create jobs in the United States. Secondly, what I would do, Jim, what we need, again, are not government-directed solutions. We need private-directed solutions, and we also need permanent solutions rather than temporary government gimmicks. That's what President Obama has given to the American people. And so I would change the corporate tax rate, which is currently about the highest in the world, down to about 20% level. Ultimately, I'd like it to see it go far lower, but immediately I think we could bring it down to 20%. And as president, I would also put a current moratorium on the implementation of Obamacare, just as the president did last Friday on the implementation of EPA rules as well.
One of the big economic issues and political issues in our country relate to unions and union power, government workers. And folks have told me you've had some different opinions on that over the years. As you know, right now the federal government has a law that if you're working for a company that's unionized, you have to join a union unless your state opts out. Fortunately, South Carolina is one of the 22 states that has opted out. But what is your position on the unionization of government workers and the influence of unions? I mean, we saw it with Obamacare, but what is your position on the right to work, a national right to work law?
Well, I support the right to work law, both nationally and at the state levels as well. I think it's very important that all American workers have the right to work. South Carolina has that right. Unfortunately, President Obama has been seeking to deny that right, in particular when it comes to the Boeing Corporation through the NLRB. When President Obama appointed on the NLRB someone who has a pro-union vote and a pro-union worldview, they have denied to the people of South Carolina literally thousands of high-paying jobs in this state. And it isn't just this one company that's being impacted. It's other companies from other nations that are looking at South Carolina. They would love to come and start businesses and build businesses here. I spoke with the governor of South Carolina. She told me that companies from as diverse areas as Japan, Canada, and Germany would love to be able to put new jobs and new businesses in this state, but they're wondering what the ruling of the NLRB will be, and they don't know if they will be able to enjoy the advantages of a right-to-work state. I believe in the right to work, and I uphold that. And as President of the United States, I can guarantee you I would not appoint anyone to the NLRB who would not respect the right to work.
Thank you, Michele. I'm going to turn you over to your colleague.
Michele, Ronald Reagan spoke all of his political life so eloquently about the shining city on the hill, standing strong and true on a granite ridge. Are we still that city? And if so, what is the next level of our destiny, and how would you take us there?
We absolutely remain that city. People think now that we are in a time of decline. We could choose to go in that direction. As my opening remarks said, we could have a view of the Constitution that sees it as elastic and one that is not permanent. Those comments actually come from the book of Matthew. And those comments were also given in a sermon by John Winthrop when he was on the Arabella with some of the early pilgrims in 1630. He encouraged the pilgrims to live their lives in such a way, once they came to the United States, that their lives would be that shining city on the hill. And again, he went on to say that if we don't choose to live our lives that way, our nation will become but a byword and a story in history. I believe that, again, now is our time for choosing. If we choose to live under the principles of the Constitution, we will remain that shining city on the hill. But if we choose to disregard those principles, then we may be what Reverend Winthrop warned, become a byword and a story for the ages. I don't believe that's what the American people are choosing. Some of our leaders in Washington may so choose, but that's not what the American people are choosing.
How do you take us to that next level of our destiny? What acts as president? Leadership, yes, but what acts in leadership would you use to take us to that next level of our destiny beyond the shining city on the hill?
What I would do as President of the United States is make the case and make the defense why the Constitution of the United States must be observed. And we can do that quite simply through bills like Obamacare. Obamacare is a bill that simply must be repealed. Why? Because number one, it has the unconstitutional individual mandate. When the federal government can tell any American that they must, as a condition of citizenship, purchase a product or service, whether it's against their will, effectively the United States government will be dictating that price, and they will become a dictator over our lives. This is an issue that must be solved in 2012, because I believe that Obamacare will so metastasize itself into every part of American life that we will never get rid of it again. And this is the foundation for socialized medicine. Make no mistake about it. It will change the face of this nation forever. That's just one issue, but there are others as well. And as President of the United States, I would want to take my background as a tax lawyer to explain why we need to change America's tax system. But before that, I would explain why it's a moral issue for the federal government to be spending almost double what it's currently taking in. Because we're not only expending the capital of previous generations, what they have built up, and current generations, what's even more morally reprehensible is the fact that this current administration is stealing from generations yet unborn to satisfy the growth of government that we can't possibly afford.
If you had to choose between taxing consumption or production, which would be your choice?
I would be choosing taxing consumption over production.
And if you were asked to, and I'm about to ask you this, would you list for us, because you've defined, I think, the future of American exceptionalism in a fashion, could you define for us the pillars of American exceptionalism, those components that are essential if we're to arrive at that level of destiny you talked about?
The pillars of American exceptionalism, I believe, are most profoundly contained in our opening document, which is the Declaration of Independence. And you can rightly call that document the Declaration of American Sovereignty. That's what the American president first must ensure, that we remain a sovereign nation, not a nation that's a part of an international conglomerate where someone else has a say over our rights and over our privileges, but one that deals in American sovereignty. And the nub and the essence of that document was written by Thomas Jefferson when he said that our rights come to us as inalienable rights given to us by God, not by government. And it also goes on to say that our current government rules by our consent. The government cannot make its decisions without our consent. We, the American people, have to let government know that they can make the rules and the laws that we live under. They are not a law unto themselves. That is the difference, and that's the foundation for American exceptionalism.
Are the pillars of American exceptionalism also included in the Bill of Rights?
Yes, because those core principles, as I stated in the very beginning of my opening remarks, that core of what is embodied in the Declaration of Independence is reflected in the Bill of Rights, whether it is the right to speech, whether it's the right to keep and bear arms, whether it's the right to be free from quartering soldiers in our home or to be free of unreasonable search and seizure. All of the Bill of Rights are ones that are embodied in the Declaration.
Free enterprise capitalism?
Free enterprise. I'm an unashamed apologist for the free market system. Without it, our business wouldn't survive.
Rule of law?
Rule of law, absolutely.
Did we leave anything out?
Those are pretty good. That's a good down payment.
How about in 36 seconds, can you tell me your view on America's global role in the future?
Well, I believe America's global role in the future, I believe that the United States has been the greatest force for good in 5,000 years of recorded human history. Because of the United States, we have seen global order observed. I think it's important that the United States remain the #1 economic powerhouse of the world and the #1 military powerhouse of the world. The world dynamic will change forever if this alters. And one thing Ronald Reagan understood, you cannot have the greatest military power without economic prosperity to bolster that power. Thank you.
Professor George.
Thank you. Congresswoman Bachmann, thank you for being with us today. My first question concerns the obligations we have to human life and also the constitutional powers of the respective levels and branches of government. Many argue that we need a constitutional amendment to overturn Roe versus Wade. However, Section 5 of the 14th Amendment expressly authorizes the Congress, by appropriate legislation, to enforce the guarantees of due process and equal protection contained in the amendment's first section. Now, as someone who believes in the inherent and equal dignity of all members of the human family, including the child in the womb, would you, as President, propose to Congress appropriate legislation pursuant to the 14th Amendment to protect human life in all stages and conditions?
Yes, I would. I would put forward a human life amendment. And at the same time, I would do everything within my power to restrict the number of abortions that occurs in the United States. Perhaps no other federal law has done more good for prohibiting abortion than the Hyde Amendment. And I would do everything I could to keep out the taxpayer funding of abortion.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
Because, as I say, some people believe that a constitutional amendment would be needed to overturn Roe versus Wade. And short of that, the best we can do is put some limitations around the edges and prohibit federal funding, as we've done in the Hyde Amendment. But my question goes to a matter of constitutional principle concerning the respective roles of the government. President Lincoln famously said in his first inaugural address that if we permit the policy of the government on matters that are essential to the whole people to be determined simply by the Supreme Court, we will have abdicated our responsibility, handed over self-government to that eminent tribunal, as Lincoln said. So given the clear mandate of the 14th Amendment empowering Congress to enforce the guarantee of equal protection, shouldn't Congress act on that now?
Yes, I believe that they should. And it is not only Abraham Lincoln that subscribed to that view, Thomas Jefferson did as well.
That's right.
Because Thomas Jefferson understood that of the three branches of government, the most important was the United States Congress, consisting of the House and the Senate. The second would be the executive. And the third, and a far distant third, was considered the Supreme Court of the United States. If the Supreme Court, by a plurality of the justices, may impose their own personal morality on the rest of the nation, then we are quite literally being ruled by those individuals as opposed to giving our consent to the people's representatives. So most assuredly, that power does lie within the representatives and the Senate, the people's representatives in the United States Congress.
And if it meant a confrontation with the Supreme Court, are you prepared for that?
Most assuredly.
Congresswoman, will the person you choose as your vice presidential running mate share your pro-life convictions and your belief in marriage as the union of husband and wife?
Yes, without a doubt, that will be.
In Illinois, after passing a civil unions bill, the state government decided to exclude certain religiously affiliated foster care and adoption agencies, including Catholic and Protestant agencies, because the agencies, in line with the teachings of their faith, cannot in conscience place children with same-sex partners. Now, at least half of Illinois' foster and adoption funds come from the federal government. Should the federal government be subsidizing states that discriminate against Catholic and other religious adoption agencies in this way?
I believe in equal protection under the law, and this is clearly a situation where we have seen a disadvantage to children who are about to be placed either in foster care or in adoptive care. And again, I believe that is one more example why the rulings of activist judges acting outside the original intent of the Constitution are so very dangerous to the foundation of the country. And it goes back to your previous question, which is who has the right to make those rules. I believe as President of the United States, in conjunction with the United States Congress and Senate, that we need to revisit that and change our rules so that we can have an equal protection under the law so that all agencies can provide that important care to children.
But if a state legislature refuses to make funding available on equal terms to those providers who, as a matter of conscience, will not place children in same-sex homes, should federal legislation come in to protect the freedom of conscience of those religious providers, even if the discrimination comes not from the courts but from the legislature?
Well, yes, I do, because I believe that is a right that is guaranteed to every American under our Constitution and Bill of Rights.
And if I could explore one more constitutional question with you, Congresswoman, I was interested to see, and I think I've understood you correctly, that you've argued not only that the federal mandate, the individual mandate in Obamacare is unconstitutional, but that even a state individual mandate would be unconstitutional. If I've understood your position correctly, that's a new one.
That is correct. I believe it is also unconstitutional
30 seconds.
for states to mandate as a consideration of citizenship, a condition of citizenship, that an individual would have to purchase a product or service even at the state government's behest.
And do you believe that the national Constitution forbids states from doing that?
I believe that it's inherent in the Constitution.
In the national Constitution?
Yes, I do.
So to say it's inherent sounds like there's not a particular provision you can point to.
Well, I'm sure you can enlighten me as to that.
Well, I wanted to know what the provision was.
Thank you very much, Representative Michele Bachmann. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.